Once again, New York City, it's your girl, Professor Eva Marie King, known in 1977 as MC Juicy E, living at my childhood home on 118th Avenue, right at the intersection of 169th Street in SouthSide Jamaica, Queens, or what the youngins call West Side Merritt. And back in those days, we actually called St. Albans, so you pick one. It's Jamaica, Queens, though. I am talking today on my audio podcast about before hip hop in Southside Jamaica, Queens. So it was customary to have house parties. And that goes back like to my parents having house parties. They purchased our family's home in 1959, and as a little girl I remember them having house parties. As I got older, my eldest sister would have house parties in our living room and dining room. Her first one that really made an impact was in January 1973 when the Genie, aka DJ Rob, brought his two turntables and speakers and amps into our home and DJ for her party. That was the first time I saw a two turntable DJing. Prior to that, my dad would take our stereo component set, hook it up to an extension cord, and bring it out on the front steps for my sisters and I. And young children around the neighborhood would come dance in our front yard. And this is before boxes. There was no JVC boombox. It was your stereo on your front step, if your parents let you do that, or in your backyard. One notable person that my sisters would stop is Vanessa Branch from 118th Road, who used to be riding by on her bike. And she would come and dance for us, and just, what a great dancer. R.I.P. on Vanessa. And back to DJ Rob, he would go on to be like our neighborhood DJ. And, I'm talking about from 1973 on, through the 70s. And, he used to do parties at the Police Athletic League. That's what is known as the Black Spectrum Theater now. There was a stage there. Carol Clark had an organization called Black Essence in the community. She used to do parties at New Hope Lutheran Church right across the street from my house on 118th Avenue between 168th and 169th. So there's a lot of history. And hopping around Queens, at that time in the early 70s, as a historian, I found that DJ Divine started DJing somewhere in about 1971, 1972, but he was on the other side of Jamaica, Queens. And you also had DJ LeVar of the Disco Brothers Connections, who I saw up in St. Albans Park with his crew and his sound system. In about 1973, 1974, Cypher of Sounds, who was DJ Understanding God, DJ Divine, who was later known as being a part of Infinity Machine, would jam in St. Albans Park baseball field in about 1975, and it had an MC named MC Spank, who was just tremendously outstanding. So I'm just giving y'all a little timeline, jumping around a little. Also in Hollis, Queens now, we have DJ Davey D. You know him as Davey DMX, a recording artist. But he also had a sound system in Hollis. And there were other DJs there. I got to talk to, the curator of the Hollis Hip Hop Museum, Orville Hall, to get the rest of the DJs' names and the early pioneers in Hollis, Queens. Then you had out in Astoria, in the early 70s, you had the Disco Twins. You had King Charles. You had New Sounds. I mean, there were a lot of crews in the early 70s. And so that's like Astoria, Corona area. Then I mentioned Hollis area, and I mentioned different parts of Jamaica, Queens. So there was a lot going on before hip hop. We were jamming. And as far as dancing, we didn't call it break dancing or b-boying. It was just burning somebody in a party. And my brother, Pacer, I call him Pacer One, but I don't like to use his government name. And Sundance were known as some of the best dancers. You had the Monroe family, they were the best dancers. They would do stuff like what James Brown did, you know, going down and spinning around on one foot. I don't know what that dance step was called, but we party in Jamaica, Queens, man. We party. So all around the city, people would partying and jamming, and there was no term called hip hop yet, but there were DJs. So I'm just recording the history from our surviving historians who gave parties and who went to parties, and teach your children the truth, you know. We had sound systems, you know, the mixer hadn't really developed to what it is now. But brothers used to just hook up two turntables and mix the record as close as possible, or they used to use something called a fader box. But we were partying in SouthSide Jamaica, Queens, the first black middle class in New York City. This is the Before Hip Hop series on my audio podcast. It's your girl, Professor Eva Marie King. We are historians of hip hop, and we will continue to tell our story on the south side of Jamaica, Queens. South side, we outside. Queens get the money. Peace.